Hey everyone! If you enjoyed this video, the full version is available on Patreon. I'll be uploading all my content there going forward.
Chapter 1. Breathe in, cough, cough, cough. On the roadside at the Night City border checkpoint, Arthur took a deep breath and almost choked to death from the stench in the air. This is the taste, so authentic. Arthur couldn't help but sigh. As a time traveler who inherited the memory of the original owner, he found that the air quality in the Night City seemed to be like this more than 10 years ago. And the reason for all this is due to that extremely high mountain of garbage, which is like Mount Everest. In fact, managing that thing is a fairly simple matter. But for the people at the top of Night City, thanks to the prosthetic technology, the odor is nothing. They just need to get a better nose. As for those poor devils, maybe they can get a loan to buy a better nose, which can also promote the economic prosperity of Night City. Arthur casually took out a document from his arms and threw it into the window of the border checkpoint. The body that Arthur traveled to was originally the Cyberpunk of Night City. I just left Night City because of some things. The main reason was that my body had been modified too much and my mind was a little unclear. In order not to become a cyber madman, the original owner left Night City and went outside to find a solution. More than 10 years have passed. Unfortunately, there is no cure for cyber madness. In the end, the original owner drank a lot of strong alcohol in a small hotel outside and died in that small room. Then Arthur took over this body. Perhaps because of time travel and strong mental power, Arthur did not suffer from the cyberpsychosis of the original owner. On the contrary, the prosthetic body on his body is now obedient, just like the one that grew out of his own body. At the same time, he also won a golden finger. This is a sign-in cheat. As long as you sign in, you can get various things, but the prerequisite is that you must return to Night City. According to Goldfinger, Night City is the place where fate gathers. Of course, it doesn't matter if Arthur doesn't return to Night City, it's just that there is no reward. The prosecutor in the window casually glanced at the document, picked up the seal in his hand, slapped it on, and threw it out without even looking at it. Then the prosecutor said in a very formulaic manner, "Welcome back to Night City, Mr. Arthur." Arthur picked up the document and put it into his pocket. He complained, "Well, it's just a stray dog that wandered outside and returned to its own kennel. What's the welcome, of?" After hearing this sentence, the prosecutor's eyes suddenly lit up, and then he hurriedly said, "In that case, do you want to consider going to the Crystal Palace? That is heaven on earth. If you buy notes from me, you can get a discount on the purchase." When Arthur heard this, the corner of his mouth twitched. He casually picked up the handbag he had placed next to him, and said something. "So this is why I don't like Night City. There are advertisements everywhere, and the only problem is that they are printed on the toilet paper in the toilet. And do you think I look like a rich man?" Arthur complained as he walked towards the roadside not far away. Before entering Night City, he had already gone through the system in his mind and made an appointment with Delamain in Night City. He had just arrived at the roadside. "I saw a black taxi waiting for me there." Arriving at the back seat, Arthur casually threw his handbag beside him, got in the car and connected his personal connection to the car system. "Welcome back to Night City, Mr. Arthur. I guess it's been a long time since we last met." "Hello, I haven't seen the artificial retarded head inside the broken iron sheet for a long time. Is there any big news in Night City recently?" Arthur looked at the time in his mind, and it happened to be 2076. He didn't want to hear the news that a young man climbed to the top of the Arezaka building and had a passionate S*X with Adam Hammer just after returning to Night City. Of course, Arthur didn't want to hear the news that two thieves climbed to the top of the Kenbai building and stabbed Saburo Arezaka to death. Although based on time, it shouldn't happen that early. But no matter what you say about those things, they are just games and animations placed in reality. Who can tell clearly? The black taxis look like more ordinary vehicles, and there is no difference. In fact, each of Delamain's taxis looks like a tank. Except for the exaggerated cannon, they are basically the same as tanks. The difference? The black taxi started driving slowly, heading towards Santo Domingo. As you know, Mr. Arthur, Night City is still Night City, and there is no news worthy of attention. If you are referring to recent hot news, then what everyone is talking about recently is the cybermaniac who caused quite a riot in Memorial Park. The opponent's strength is very strong. Even several members of the terrorist mobile team have been killed. I heard that the opponent's records have been turned into black mutuo by people in the black market, and there are a lot of rumors in the room. Arthur always felt familiar when he heard these words, as if he had seen them somewhere before. But after thinking for a moment, he immediately gave up. It is completely normal for cyber lunatics to appear in Night City. In addition, as long as a cyber-psychotic patient appears, the terrorist mobile team will rush to the scene immediately, because the code of Night City is to use cybermaniacs to deal with cybermaniacs. Therefore, it is completely normal for the terrorist mobile team and the cybermaniacs to fight each other. It probably escaped from the laboratory of some big company. After so many years, why are there still such stupid people in Night City? Arthur couldn't help but complain a little. After a while, the car slowly stopped at the bottom of the mobile super skyscraper. Arthur carried his luggage and stood in front of the building shrouded in the sunset. He touched his chin and suddenly felt that this building seemed familiar. But he felt relieved when he thought that his predecessor and his wife lived here. How could the place where I lived before not look familiar? The bill has been sent to your personal account. You are welcome to choose Delamain next time. Choose Delamain and leave your worries at home. After saying this, the black taxi ran away quickly. Arthur scratched the back of his head and looked at the balance that had been deducted from the lower left corner of his retina with some heartache. After shaking his head, Arthur got into the elevator and came to a familiar floor and outside a familiar room. Looking at the familiar door of the room, Arthur couldn't help but touch his chin, because there was a reminder notice posted on the door. Obviously, the people inside the gate have not paid rent for a while. If they do not pay rent after 3 days, the room will be taken back and re-rented. Chapter 2. After Arthur thought for a moment, he suddenly clapped his hands and looked like he suddenly understood. Yes, he should have thought that it had been more than 10 years since the original owner's wife and children had probably moved away long ago, and might even have died in Night City. So it's not necessarily his wife and children living here. Thinking of this, Arthur couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, and went directly to the door of the room to take a closer look. But he didn't expect that as soon as Arthur came to the door, a window would pop up on his retina, asking him if he wanted to pay the rent immediately. Arthur's mouth twitched. Sure enough, things that should be faced should be faced. It's a blessing, not a curse. It's a curse that cannot be avoided. If the memory of the original owner is correct, then this set of rooms should be registered in the name of the original owner. Under normal circumstances, if you move, the people here will definitely change the registrant's information. Since nothing has been replaced, it means that the people inside have not been replaced either. Arthur clicked OK, and almost as soon as he clicked OK, the door opened. And part of the amount in the lower left corner of the retina was deducted. Arthur strode into the room, threw his handbag on the sofa, looked around and found that no one was in the room. On the contrary, the whole room was filled with the breath of life. There were clothes on the sofa, and some 100% artificially produced food from Night City on the table. The radio on the table was automatically turned on and was playing some news about Night City. Arthur casually picked up a bottle of sparkling water on the table, unscrewed it and took a swig of it. System. Ding, sign in successfully. Congratulations to the host for getting a suppressor manufacturing plan. The next moment, Arthur felt that there was a lot more knowledge in his mind that did not belong to him. Arthur pinched his eyebrows and quickly understood everything. In this world, almost everyone stuffs some weird parts into their bodies. These things are not originally in your body and will naturally trigger various rejection reactions. At this time, a drug called an inhibitor is needed. On the one hand, this inhibitor suppresses immune problems, and on the other hand, it suppresses neurological problems. But no matter what, the role of the drug is to trick your body into sneaking up on you, making your body unable to recognize that the old guy who has been working for decades has been replaced by a sexy BCH. There is almost no difference between the function of a suppressor and that of an inhibitor, except that one is a drug and the other is a chip. As long as the suppressor is plugged into the data interface, the suppressor will replace the medicine to cheat and attack your body. Arthur touched his chin and felt that this thing was not good at all. Arthur even thought that this thing should be something that was created in a large company's laboratory and then hidden away. Because selling this suppressor, how can I make money by selling medicine? You must know that potions can be sold repeatedly. As long as he is still alive, he has to keep buying them, and it is all money. This suppressor only needs to be purchased once. For Arthur, this thing is simply not cost-effective. If the other party doesn't continue to consume, how can he make money? Just as Arthur was thinking, there was suddenly a loud noise next to him. Boom! Arthur immediately pulled out the pistol from his waist and pointed it straight at the vent that made the noise. Soon, a boy with his head wrapped in gauze and wearing a school uniform climbed out of the vent and dropped a black plastic bag full of things. Arthur was stunned for a moment. David? David Martinez? Seeing the other party crawling in from the vent, Arthur looked around the room again. So this is David Martinez's home? And I'm David Martinez's father? Just as Arthur was thinking, David Martinez, who was more nervous, finally saw Arthur pointing the gun straight at him, and immediately raised his hands. Well, I just came back to get something that belongs to me. I don't want to stay in this room. Apparently, David mistook Arthur for a cleanup crew who wanted to rent a house without paying rent. Arthur slowly retracted the gun and fell back, sitting on the sofa with his legs crossed and his hands hanging on the back of the sofa. He held a pistol in one hand, and his eyes flickered, looking up and down at David with interest. I'm afraid we haven't seen each other for more than 10 years. What happened to make you disrespect me so much? You don't even want to call me father. Arthur became very satisfied with his original owner's family at this moment. This is David, a man who can become a legend in Night City within a year. Definitely not because of David's mother Gloria. After all, his surname is Martinez and not CAO, so he definitely does not have the blood of CAO's thieves. He simply took a fancy to David's qualifications and felt that he had a golden thigh and could make a lot of money in the future. Ha! David immediately put on a confused expression. What do you mean you don't even want to call him father? Could it be that his mother found a stepfather for him outside his back? Following this idea, David thought about it for a while and felt that this matter seemed quite reasonable. After all, his mother has taken care of him alone for so long, so it is understandable that she suddenly wants to pursue her own happiness. Thinking of this, David's face suddenly turned serious. My father is dead. I will never call you dad. But if it is a marriage with my mother, then I agree. As for the title, the most I can call you is uncle. Good guy. Arthur was almost killed by David. Do you still need your approval for the marriage between your mother and me? Do you still want to just call me uncle? It seems that the naughty child needs to be taught a lesson, otherwise he will not know how red the flowers are. Boom! The pistol in Arthur's hand instantly fired into the open space at David's feet. David was startled and immediately raised his hands as if surrendering. What are you doing? Arthur, on the other hand, continued to sit on the sofa leisurely, pointing his gun at David, with a smile on his face. Call Daddy. David. David looked at the pistol in front of him and the blackened bullet holes on the ground. After a moment of silence, he said, Dad. Alas. My good son. Arthur immediately stood up with a smile, came to David's side, patted his shoulder, and put the pistol in his hand into his hand. This can be considered a gift from Dad to you. David looked at the pistol in his hand silently. If his memory was correct, the name of this gun should be Unity, right? It's neither a good nor a bad pistol. The only upside is that it's cheap and reliable enough. After a long silence, David quietly stuffed the pistol into his waist, and then said, "Thank you." Although he was threatened with shooting and called someone else's father, this was one of the few gifts he received, and of course he had to cherish it. Arthur smiled, took out a cigarette from his pocket and stuffed it into his mouth. "Where's your mom?" After David was silent for a moment, he shook his head with a wry smile and said, "When I was picking me up from school, there was a car accident on the road. We didn't buy insurance, so I sent her to the Night City Mental Rehabilitation Center." Although Arthur already knew, there were many things that he had to ask before he knew them, otherwise there was no way to explain them. After taking the cigarette out of his mouth and taking a deep breath, Arthur patted the other party's shoulder. "You are such a filial son." David thought Arthur was complimenting him, so he scratched the back of his head in embarrassment and twisted. "I'm not complimenting you, BD." Arthur slapped him hard on the back of the head, rolled his eyes angrily, picked up the black plastic bag on the ground, and threw it on the sofa next to him. He quickly came to the sofa, took his handbag over, opened the zipper, poured out all the clothes inside, leaving 2 long guns, then put the cigarette into his mouth and zipped it up again, picked up the bag. Chapter 3. After doing all this, Arthur's eyes lit up, and he pulled David and ran towards the elevator. David touched the back of his head in confusion, not knowing what was going on. It wasn't until after entering the elevator and waiting for the elevator to go down that David said with some confusion, "What are we going to do?" Arthur rolled his eyes, and then said to the air, "Delaman, don't tell me what is available or not, I know you can get those things." Okay, can I pay a handling fee?" "You said you wanted to double it, you are really good at business, no wonder you were able to kill those vampires." After finishing speaking, the elevator just arrived at the underground garage. Arthur took David to a black taxi parked nearby and sat directly in it. After Arthur connected the personal link and identified his identity, he breathed a sigh of relief. Night City Rehabilitation Center is expected to arrive in 10 minutes. Only then did Arthur have time to take the cigarette off his lips, finally blowing out a smoke ring and looking at David next to him. "I should have told your mother a long time ago that boys shouldn't be so protective." "What are you talking about?" Although David didn't know what happened, looking at Arthur's face and hurried attitude, he knew that there must be something bad going on, and it also involved his only relative in the world, his mother. There was also some panic among them. Arthur took another puff of cigarette and said slowly, "Night City Rehabilitation Center is a scavenger hospital on the surface. If patients have good consciousness, they will charge very high medical bills. If the patient is unconscious, they will remove the implant from the patient, and then sell it second-hand to those bastards who filmed Dark Mutual with a disease that is 1 round older than the patient." After David heard this, he entered a state of shock, as if he was afraid to accept the facts. As a fan of Black Mutuo, David has seen quite a few Black Mutuo. Although he doesn't think much of the Black Mutuo among the Black Mutuos. But in fact, the circle of Black Mutuo is not particularly large, so he has heard more or less what that kind of Black Mutuo is like. He never thought that something like this would happen to his loved ones one day. And it was delivered by him himself. How ironic is this? How does this make him accept this fact? After a while, when David was about to say something, Arthur directly pushed the cigarette he was holding into the other person's mouth. Arthur opened the handbag next to him and took out a long gun. David felt that if there was nothing wrong with his eyes, the gun in front of him should be a kinetic shotgun named Kill. Many people on the internet commented on him that he can even punch a hole in time and space. Arthur, on the other hand, didn't care at all about David's reaction. He pulled the bolt of the gun and checked the ammunition inside. After finding that there was no problem, Arthur immediately opened the front seat and found a small storage room under the seat. He took out 2 round objects from it, stuffed them into his pocket, and lit one for himself again. Cigarette. Delaman is here waiting for me to come back soon, it won't take more than a few minutes. Of course the customers will is our direction. The bill has been sent to your personal account. Please confirm it later. I wish you good luck. Arthur smiled, then turned to look at David, who seemed to be a little frightened. He immediately pulled him out of the back seat of Delamain and came all the way to the Night City Spirit, the entrance to the rehabilitation center. Many people around him dispersed instantly when they saw the kinetic shotgun in Arthur's hand, the cigarette in his mouth, and the invisible prosthetic body on him. Many people also screamed, and some people's eyes suddenly lit up, as if they were dialing the NCPD number. In the light-polluted city of Night City, it is simply a dream to see the stars, but the moon in the sky is quite big and round. In the true sense, it is a dark and windy night that kills people. He took a deep drag on the cigarette, exhaled it slowly, then showed a smile and looked at David next to him. Ready for an orgy, kid? Boom. Before David could say a word of mine, Arthur kicked the hospital door with a loud noise. The hospital door fell to both sides in an instant, and then Arthur entered the hospital in a swaggering manner, killing people. After David was stunned for a moment, he followed Arthur closely with the uniform in his hand for fear of being left behind. A doctor walked out of the treatment room after hearing the sound, and at this moment, the thick muzzle of the killing gun in Arthur's hand was already pointed at the doctor's head. It proves that with the high-tech prosthetic eyes, the doctor can even see clearly the rifling in the gun barrel, as well as the shotgun further inside the rifling. At this time, the doctor did not dare to say a word, and directly raised his hands in a posture of surrender. Gloria, when were you admitted? Arthur looked at David next to him. David was frightened by Arthur's wild style. When he heard Arthur's question, he stumbled and answered. This afternoon. The red-haired beauty admitted to the hospital this afternoon is named Gloria. The cause of injury was a car accident. I believe that if you take a look at this beauty, you will definitely be impressed by her. Are you here to visit the sick? But God is visiting a sick person. Are people in this world so blind? Anyway, there were a lot of people in the hospital, and Arthur was not lacking either of them. He pressed his right index finger down slightly and suddenly the fire started to shine. Boom! Then the white and red ones evenly covered the entire hall. Arthur took the time to add, sorry, wrong answer. Bang! 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 The next moment, because the doctor was stalling for time, the gunman at the scene no longer hesitated and immediately pulled the trigger in his hand. But Arthur didn't care at all. In an instant, time in the entire space seemed to be slowed down. Arthur leisurely pulled David back a few steps to avoid the incoming bullets, and then Arthur fired 3 more shots in a hidden direction. The next moment, time resumed its flow, and with 3 bangs, the body fell directly from the 2nd floor to the ground on the 1st floor. Vomit. After David saw this scene, he could no longer hold the gun in his hand, and fell to his knees directly, and then started to retching. Maybe it was because he hadn't eaten much all day, so he didn't vomit anything, but David felt like he was about to vomit out his intestines. Chapter 4. Although David likes to watch dark mutuo and likes to watch bloody and exciting things for excitement. But if that kind of thing really happened in front of your eyes, the feeling would be completely different. Because of something like mutuo, no matter how immersed you are in it, you will clearly realize that it is not reality. This is mutuo's protective mechanism. But if it happened in reality, this protection mechanism would not exist. You're only at this level, but you can't do it. Those black mutuos of yours are really in vain. If you are too weak, you won't be able to survive in this world. Follow me. Arthur didn't wait for David's intention and strode straight into the hospital. It must be said that a man who can become a legend in Night City within a year has strong adaptability. Although Arthur didn't offer much comfort, David stood up on his own, wiped the corner of his mouth with his right hand holding the pistol, and barely kept up with Arthur's pace. Arthur dialed the number of his old friend while walking. Although he has not returned to Night City for a long time, he still has some resources in his hands, which he used to be in Night City. Although cyberpunks are awesome today and may die in a smelly ditch tomorrow, there are some people who value their lives very much and hide themselves very well. These people have very clear goals and are able to restrain their actions. So the probability of these people surviving is very high. Arthur happened to have worked with a hacker who had such a personality. It's not that Arthur doesn't want to contact the other party in advance, it's mainly because the original owner is very confused due to cyberpsychosis, and the memories he gives are intermittent, and the mess is so messy that it makes people's heads explode. Arthur would only rummage through the trash heap when necessary, otherwise he really couldn't stand it. Of course, even if Arthur doesn't read it himself, he will be able to recall something immediately when he occasionally sees some familiar faces. Hi, T-Bug. Arthur? I thought you had gone crazy and died outside, but I didn't expect you to come back to this muddy pond again. Please, the only one who can kill me is myself. I have something to ask you. Please help me check that there is a person named Gloria in the Night City Psychiatric Rehabilitation Center who admitted a car accident patient this afternoon. I understand, it's good to be angry for beauty, right? Please, I have told you not to read so many literary books, otherwise your speech will become literate. You owe me a favor. The specific information has been sent to your terminal. Pay attention to check it. Literature is the human soul. If you don't read something, sooner or later you will become a cyberpsychopath like you. The speed is quite fast, but I don't know how accurate it is. I can barely be considered a rookie. Okay, that's it for today. Let's work together next time when we have time. Arthur looked at the information displayed on his terminal, touched his chin and sneered, "It's really bloody." Arthur adjusted his direction and walked towards a certain direction deep in the hospital. No one who came to block or passed in front of him and wanted to escape would be able to leave the hospital alive. The road ahead was filled with corpses without heads, and red and white were mixed on the ground, coating the entire road evenly. David, on the other hand, was muttering something in his mouth, going crazy, holding the gun in his hand and shooting wildly in all directions. He seemed to be overstimulated. Although he didn't hit anyone, the important thing was the sense of participation. Arthur even dodged David's bullets several times. In the end, Arthur couldn't bear it anymore and gave David a big mouth. He was trying to kill his biological father. Can you wake up? You're so crazy, just like a cyberpsycho. Arthur complained angrily, and shot another gun-wielding doctor in the head. David, on the other hand, twitched the corner of his mouth slightly and complained, "Who is the one who looks like a cyber-psychopath?" Arthur glanced at him and didn't answer, but continued walking in a certain direction in the basement. There are not many doctors in this hospital. Because it is evening, everyone needs to rest. Although Arthur made a lot of noise here, it was nothing to the Night City at night. It is too common for hundreds of people to die every day in Night City. Gunshots are everywhere every day, which is a unique and beautiful scenery in Night City. Because it is so frequent that NCPD has no time to pay attention to these small things. After all, they are peace officers, or simply bodyguards, who are only responsible for protecting their employers. What's more, the Night City Psychiatric Rehabilitation Center, who doesn't know where that place is? Even if something goes wrong, NCPD will just come and wash the floor. After all, the profession of scavenger is at the lowest level in the entire Night City. Even the homeless people on the street don't like these scavengers, let alone the NCPD who prides themselves on having a sense of justice. Arthur soon arrived at the basement door. Standing here, but no one seems to be coming. I'll go in for a while. I want to go in too, I want to save my mother. Some scenes in it are not suitable for children. Watching it too much will have some impact on your mind. Arthur complained angrily that the scavenger's operating room was not a good place. The excitement inside was 100 times, no, 1,000 times more exciting than what happened just now. Because on the battlefield or in a firefight between the two sides, at most the bullets would only penetrate the body, and then the person would lie down on the ground, leaving some blood at most. But the scavenger's operating room is a real slaughterhouse. After rejecting David's proposal, Arthur strode into the basement and closed the door, not paying attention to the displeasure on David's face. The scene in the basement was as hell-like as Arthur expected, with blood, body parts, metal saws, and scalpels everywhere. Many people were even hung in the air, with blood slowly falling from their bodies and falling to the ground. Wails and cries could be heard in the air. Not to mention a teenager like David, he still couldn't bear this scene even if it were a different NCPD police officer. This is why Arthur didn't let David in. Although they are children under the cyberpunk worldview, children are children, and if they are not suitable for contact, they are not suitable for contact. This is why scavengers are the ones at the bottom of the contempt chain in the entire Night City. Anyone who sees them will feel disgusted. Because scavengers are not hunting enemies at all, they are hunting a more fundamental category, that is, people. Chapter 5. Some time later, Arthur found his wife in this operating room that looked like a slaughterhouse. After all, Gloria's red hair is extremely conspicuous no matter where she is placed in the world. Arthur pulled out the personal link from his hand and directly connected it to Gloria's brain-computer interface. The next moment, a progress bar began to advance slowly on Arthur's retina. Well, after so long, there is no improvement at all? They are also scavengers. They are a group of poor people who have no money to update these system viruses. Arthur scratched the back of his head and waited quietly for the progress bar to finish. Gloria, who was originally frowning, immediately relaxed her expression after the progress bar ran out, and she seemed to have fallen asleep. Looking at that stunningly beautiful face, Arthur felt a little impulsive for a moment. There is an urge to kiss her. Just when Arthur was hesitating, a confused and impatient voice suddenly came from beside him. "What are you doing? Shouldn't we leave immediately?" Arthur turned his head and saw only his eldest son David, nervously holding the uniform pistol he had given him, nervously and curiously looking at the surrounding environment. If it hadn't been for the wrong time, Arthur had no doubt in his mind that this big boy would have reached out and poked the corpses. Boom! Arthur was almost mad at his grown-up son, and originally wanted to kiss him. What a beautiful scene, a hero saving the beauty. Isn't it natural to give a kiss? As a result, he was interrupted by this brat and couldn't do anything. The angry Arthur punched him in the back of the head, causing him to grow a bump. David looked confused, with tears streaming from his eyes. He covered the back of his head and looked at Arthur in confusion. Arthur hugged Gloria and said righteously, "I asked you to wait outside to let you relax outside. There is no one outside now. If someone ambushes outside, we don't know anything. You will be beaten into a sieve." David immediately rolled his eyes. Don't think that he doesn't know anything because he is young. This strange uncle who ran out of nowhere was clearly planning something against his mother. Although he is now grateful to this weird uncle for saving his mother, this is not the reason for this weird uncle to bully his mother. The two entered quickly, with Delamain waiting at the door, and the black taxi slowly left the Night City Mental Rehabilitation Center. Less than 3 minutes after they left, the car, with its red and blue lights flashing as much as possible, stopped at the Night City Rehabilitation Center. The director seems to have made a big fuss this time. According to the people at the Cyber Security Center, basically everyone inside was killed. The NCPD officer sitting in the passenger seat picked up a cigarette, lit it for himself and took a light puff. It's better if they all die. They are all the dregs of a bunch of scavengers. If they hadn't been doctors on the surface, I would have arrested them long ago and told the brothers to check the bodies and carry them away. That's it. Sir, why don't we continue to investigate? What are you investigating? Didn't you hear what I just said clearly? They are just a bunch of scavengers and scum. Why do they need to investigate? It's better if they all die. They are heroes. If you really investigate further, you might be killed by others. Shoot black shots. On the other side, Arthur held Gloria in his arms and said to Delamain, Delamain, Dr. Victor, you should still remember, right? Of course, Mr. Arthur, everyone who knows Dr. Victor basically praises Dr. Victor's clinic. Delamain drove slowly towards Victor's clinic, while Arthur touched Gloria's face. Is this how you live your life when I'm not here? You don't even have a member of the trauma team. As long as you live in Night City, if you don't buy insurance, you may go bankrupt at any time. If you live in Night City, if you have any money, you will definitely buy a membership to the trauma group. Because in this city, gunfights are as common as drinking water and eating. Are you really my dad? David did not answer Arthur's previous question. Instead, he seriously asked about Arthur's identity. He had already realized that Arthur was not the stepfather his mother had found for him, but his real father. Arthur nodded and then said, well, didn't I tell you? My name is Arthur Martinez. You are serious? Of course I am your father. A-hole. Why did you leave? David became excited instantly. The grievances he had suffered over the years flooded into his heart in an instant, and the next moment he wanted to teach the BD in front of him who abandoned his wife and son. Arthur did not refute anything, but looked at Gloria in his arms and said, well, I found some black mutuo at home. There is a black mutuo in it, which is about what happened in Memorial Park a few days ago. Cybermaniac murder case. To put it simply, you can understand that I have cyberpsychosis and it is very serious. If there is no other way, I can only leave Night City and go out to find a treatment. If I had stayed, depending on my situation at the time, I might have killed you before you even grew that big. There was silence for a moment in the vehicle space. David just stared at Arthur, while Arthur looked at Gloria in his arms. I have to say that my wife is really beautiful. This made Arthur very satisfied. After all, I was single and solo for more than 20 years. But he didn't expect that he would be given a wife immediately after traveling through time. In this way, Arthur had to sigh, but Arthur was not very satisfied with this randomly given son. Although the other person had good qualifications, he looked a bit naive and did not look like he could live independently in a ghost place like Night City. People who go down to trick V into doing things requires high emotional intelligence. Arthur thinks that tricking David into doing things can be done even with low emotional intelligence. At this moment, Delamain's appearance interrupted the awkwardness in the carriage. Mr. Arthur and Dr. Victor's clinic have arrived. I hope you can still choose Delamain next time. Arthur waved his hand and then picked up Gloria, got out of the car and walked out, saying, if you can make it cheaper, I might choose you more times, otherwise I will consider buying a car. Car. That's really a pity. I think only a dedicated driver can reflect your identity. What identity does a stray dog on the street want? Chapter 6. Mr. Arthur, who is famous among cyberpunks, is not just a wild dog on the street. Where does this famous name come from? I'm not a god, it's just that some people want to put me on the altar. After finishing speaking, Arthur waved his hand to indicate that Delamain could leave. David was holding Arthur's handbag and staring at Arthur, as if he wanted to see the flowers on Arthur. The identity of the original owner is actually not that high. In fact, he is just a relatively strong cyberpunk. It's just that the mission completion rate and the methods used are too violent, so it is relatively famous among cyberpunks. This was the message in Arthur's mind. However, things like cyberpunk may die in the smelly ditches on the street at any time. So unless you want to be a terrorist or want to save the world, Otherwise, your name in Cyberpunk will be nothing more than a short-term talking point. Because there are not many cyberpunks like the original owner in the Night City, and it doesn't matter how famous they are, they end up rotting in a sewer. If it weren't for Arthur, the time traveler, the fate of the original owners would be the same as theirs, except that some people died in their own kennels and some died outside the kennels. Arthur did not walk through Misty's psychic room. After all, he was his own boss and had already left work. Arthur could only go down through the locked wire mesh door next to him. Although there was a lock on it, Arthur just squeezed it and deformed the lock, pulled it off and threw it aside. Arthur was just about to walk inside when he spotted David, whose curious eyes were flickering like a 1,000 watt light bulb. The corner of his mouth twitched and he explained, "More than 70% of my body is not original. Otherwise, why do you think I would suffer from cyberpsychosis?" As he walked inside, Arthur thought and felt that it was necessary to remind himself of this big boy. After all, Arthur felt that he would have to rely on David to take care of himself in the future. He didn't want to drag himself up to the Arezaka building with a lot of old bones and have a passionate S*X with Adam Hammer, a freak with a body transformation rate of over 90%. Don't be surprised, and don't think I'm bragging. In fact, this is what we have to do, because Cyberpunk is such a creature. Accept tasks, get money, transform your body, accept stronger tasks, get more money, transform your body into a stronger one. Just keep doing the positive cycle like this. If the legs don't work, change the legs. If the lungs don't work, change the lungs. If the heart doesn't work, change the heart. But you know, everything in the world can't always be positive. Then it will be the same as my previous situation, and suddenly I will find that something in my body is wrong. My fingers kept trembling, and I couldn't even control my emotions. It gets worse and worse until the medication can no longer suppress it. Then everything goes into a negative cycle and you end up becoming a cybermaniac. As he talked, Arthur came to Victor's clinic. There was no door closed here. He just pushed open the curtain and Arthur had already walked in. As soon as he entered, he heard bursts of noise. There were cheers, exclamations, and the muffled sound of hitting the flesh. What's more important is the passionate commentary. People who come to the clinic late at night are generally not nice people. Victor made a sarcastic comment without looking back. His eyes were still focused on the small screen in front of him. A boxing match was being played on the screen. He didn't know where it came from. From that look, Arthur knew it must be a black boxing match, not a regular boxing match. "You're right, I'm really not a good person, because I will exploit you as soon as I come back." Hearing Arthur's somewhat familiar voice, Victor was startled, and then immediately turned his head to look at Arthur. Just for a moment, his eyes became a little red, but he quickly suppressed it. There was that smile that we always see each other on his face. He couldn't stop the raised corners of his mouth, and even stopped watching his favorite boxing match. Victor hurriedly stepped forward, looked at Arthur carefully, and then said with a smile, "Welcome back to Night City, Arthur. I thought you had died outside a long time ago, but I didn't expect that you would still have time to come and see me, an old friend. It seems that you have found a treatment outside and your mental condition is very good now. Do you want me to give you a comprehensive examination later?" After hearing this, Arthur immediately rolled his eyes, then carried Gloria to the side and put her on the chair. "This is my wife, and that silly boy over there is my son. I just checked and there is nothing wrong with my wife's physical condition. Please help me deal with it. After all, you are a professional." Without Arthur having to say anything, Victor had already sat on the chair next to him, picked up the wire and connected it to Gloria's brain-computer interface. While looking at the data on the display panel in front of him, Victor touched his chin and said, "Just came back from the scavenger." Sir Arthur nodded, not finding anything surprising. Because in Night City, basically all forces have their own characteristics. If you want to know who did it, you can basically tell it clearly at a glance. Of course, to do this requires extensive experience. You know, I have been looking for ways to treat myself outside these years. Gloria didn't tell me that she lived in such a mess in Night City that even ordinary members of the trauma team couldn't afford it. As a result, she came out this afternoon. He got into a car accident and was sent to the Night City Mental Rehabilitation Center by this stupid boy. At this point, Arthur immediately gave David next to him a headache. David covered his forehead with some grievance, but he did not dare to resist because he did something wrong. Victor looked at David next to him, then with a trace of guilt on his face, he shook his head with a wry smile. Arthur patted Victor on the shoulder and said, "Actually, I understand the situation pretty much. I really can't blame you for this kind of thing. Because this is my fault, probably because of my cyberpsychosis problem, Gloria didn't want David to be exposed to these things, so she directly cut off contact with you." Victor smiled bitterly when he heard this, then after reading the data, he pushed the display aside. 2 or 3 broken ribs, big problem with the lungs that may need to be replaced, and then a little bit of a concussion and some other cracked bones. When Victor said this, he looked at Arthur, and the meaning was self-evident. Arthur touched his chin and said, "I still have some savings. Help me exchange them for top-notch products for civilian use, definitely not second-hand products." Chapter 7. In the world of cyberpunk, prosthetic technology is very common. There is even a more darkly humorous joke, that is, the steel factory can actually recruit people on the street to practice steel, because the steel content in these people is much higher than that of iron ore. Since it is a product, it will naturally be divided into civilian and military uses. Not only for civilian use and military use, but also for high-grade and low-grade, customized and mass products. But the more powerful something is, the better it is not. As the saying goes, too much is too little. The more powerful the prosthetic body, the more important the prosthetic body is, the colder it is, so cold that it can even pull the human soul out of the body. So ordinary people only need to use civilian-grade products. When these things are installed in ordinary people, they won't even have much rejection reaction. Sometimes they don't even need neurosuppressants and immunosuppressants. By the way, if the bill is not enough, I may need to pay it first. Arthur looked at the money balance displayed on his retina, suddenly felt guilty, and touched his nose. Although the original owner has been outside taking on tasks. But in fact, I didn't make much money, because cyberpunk itself is such a profession, and most of the money was used to purchase equipment, logistics items, and medicines. Although he has a small fortune, this amount of money can only be said to be a drop in the bucket for those luxurious technologies. Victor shrugged his shoulders, his eyes immediately glowed blue, and he immediately followed Arthur's request and started ordering the items he needed online. There is no rest in Night City, or in other words, Night City is truly awake only at night. If you get injured in the future, remember to run here. Victor is the best doctor in the entire Night City. Even if there is a hole in your head, he can help you patch it up and ensure that you can climb Arasaka Tower alive and well. Arthur smiled and patted David on the shoulder while frantically blowing rainbow farts to Victor. Can you stop blowing it? Ordinary doctors can at most help people replace some parts. Looking at Victor again, V. Zhentian had been beaten out of his wits by others, and his blood was all red and white. At this level, Victor was able to save him, and he was alive and kicking within a few days after the rescue. He was even able to have a passionate S*X match with Adam Hammer. He was an expert in medical skills, not to mention that he was a miracle doctor. That is also a true rejuvenation. To be honest, V. Zhentian didn't give Victor a banner, which was really aggrieved. After hearing this, Victor smiled bitterly, shook his head and said, "You are just a dabbler who became a monk on the way. Don't talk nonsense. If someone really blows your head off, I will send you to the crematorium as soon as possible." Arthur immediately raised his middle finger, smiled and cursed, "FKU. Victor also smiled and slid his chair to the side. He took out 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey, then slid back and filled Arthur's glass. Logically speaking, you cannot drink alcohol before the doctor operates. But for such a trivial matter, it was simply not worth mentioning to Victor. How can you meet old friends without drinking? Just drink less. So Victor poured a shallow layer for himself, instead of filling a full glass like he was pouring wine for Arthur. After Arthur picked up the wine glass and had a drink with Victor, he took a sip and looked at the surrounding environment. It was a dim environment with a few neon lights. Except for the shadowless lamp above the operating table, the rest of the place was as dark as a cemetery. Those who didn't know better thought this place was renovated from a morgue. Old way, I'm not telling you, this clinic is still like this after all these years. How can you possibly get any business if you do this? I would say you might as well move to the city center and choose a prime location. Then we hire a designer from a big company. We must design the most high-end and elegant clinic. Let's just rent a building on the 4th floor. The elevator on the 5th floor has direct access. The first floor of this clinic is the smallest, so we need to get more than 200 square meters. Then we will build some hanging gardens and a large swimming pool. We have a pure British natural beauty in the reception room. When this client comes, no matter what happens, we will say to each other in an authentic British accent, "Sir, how can I help you?" Just configure the other party to come to our place, even if it is a crazy antivirus, we will burn him 18,000 at a time. Within 3 to 5 years, the richest man in the Night City will have to be replaced by someone else. After hearing this, Victor almost spit out the wine in his mouth. After finally swallowing it, Victor immediately rolled his eyes at Arthur. As for the richest man in Night City, if he really did this, he felt that he wouldn't be able to get the loan even if he sold it to a bank. Now that you've made your plans, how about you give me a sample first, and I'll work for you then? What I want is a little stability, and I'll forget about it if I just charge a dead salary. I'm still the richest man in Night City or something like that. It's better to let you, Sir Arthur, be the one. Arthur touched his nose in embarrassment. Isn't this bragging? How come you got it up and running as soon as you started? Drinking without bragging is half the fun. Victor put the wine glass in his hand on the table and said with some confusion, "Has your cyberpsychosis really been cured?" It's not that Victor doesn't believe Arthur, it's mainly cyberpsychosis, which is currently considered a terminal illness worldwide. Arthur was silent for a moment, touched his chin and said, "I actually don't know the specific situation myself, but the trembling hands, nausea, and irrationality have never happened again since I got better. I didn't take any medicine, nor did I do any occult research. Who knows, maybe God originally wanted to fish out gold from the cesspool, but instead he fished out a piece of stinky shit like me." Of course Arthur will not tell the fact that he is a time traveler. This kind of thing can only be attributed to coincidence. Although the reason sounds ridiculous, it is actually very suitable. Because in this world, there are still no drugs that can cure cyberpsychosis. Therefore, many people began to place their hopes on other things, which is the so-called occult research. Some people believe in gods and pray for their forgiveness, while others start meditating in the hope of cultivating a mysterious power. Although these methods sound very unscientific, a small number of cyberpsychotics have indeed been cured. Chapter 8. After listening to Arthur's words, Victor touched his chin and finally shook his head. The brain has always been a forbidden area set by God for mankind. Even in this world, no one can thoroughly study the human body. So no matter what happens, Victor can actually accept it, no matter how ridiculous the reason is. After thinking for a moment with no results, Victor took another sip of wine, looked at Arthur and asked, "What are you going to do next? Continue to be a cyberpunk? If you come back to the world, the people in the Next Life nightclub will definitely be crazy about it." After Arthur heard this, he was silent for a moment and shook his head. "Let's forget it. The world belongs to young people. I'm already old and can't do anything anymore. Maybe I can start a small business. How about selling beef offal on the street? Do you think it's a good idea? When Victor heard this, he rolled his eyes and said, "Where are the cows in Night City?" As soon as these words came out, Arthur was stunned for a moment, and then scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. He almost forgot that the food in Night City is basically 100% artificial. There is 100% no beef in the beef noodles, and 100% no eggs in the eggs. At this moment, Arthur suddenly remembered the suppressor production data that the system sent him. I had been so busy before that even my wife had forgotten about her golden finger. Touching his chin, Arthur suddenly felt that this was a good business. As long as it is produced, there is basically no need to worry about sales. However, this production data needs to be changed, and we need to find a suitable hacker to help. While Arthur was thinking, there was a few knocks on the door outside the clinic. Victor walked over and quickly came back with a few boxes. After Arthur saw Victor's actions, he carried David and waited outside. "You can actually come into the afterlife bar. Can you take me to the afterlife bar?" "Oh, my dear son, if you call me anything like you again, I will kick you hard with my size 42 feet. Arthur sat on the sofa next to him, picked up Victor's whiskey and poured himself a glass. "Dad." After hearing this, David originally wanted to refute, but when he thought about the fact that he had been hit on the back of the head several times before, he suddenly hesitated. He covered his butt and hesitated for a moment before shouting out those two words. Arthur nodded with satisfaction when he heard the word "Dad," picked up the wine glass and took another sip. "Of course I can take you there if you want to, but it's not a nice place, it's just an ordinary bar. But there are the strongest cyberpunks in the city, and the people there are legends of Night City." "Then you guessed wrong. There are only two kinds of people there. One is the fool who is waiting to be fooled by others and wants to become famous in the world. The other is the wild dog who is waiting to fool others and then climb up on their bones. Apart from the fact that it is built in a morgue, there is nothing special about the afterlife bar." From Arthur's perspective as a time traveler, the afterlife bar is actually a crime center. A large amount of criminal transactions are carried out in this place every day. Hiring others to commit theft, commercial espionage, smuggling, hiring murderers. As long as you can imagine the crime, the afterlife bar is basically involved. However, Night City is a prison filled with criminals, so there seems to be nothing wrong with the afterlife bar being a paradise for criminals. Why is this like this? I also want to order a Johnny Silverhand inside. What's so delicious about that thing? Isn't it just a glass of old-fashioned tequila with a little beer and chili? Go back and mix it yourself. Arthur lit a cigarette casually, then looked at David and said with a smile, "I almost forgot that you are not allowed to drink at your age. If you want to go to the afterlife bar, you probably have to discuss it with Gloria." Arthur took a deep drag on the cigarette, and then felt a little distressed about how he should educate David. After all, he had never had a child before. This suddenly gave him a good eldest son, and he really didn't know how to teach him. You can't look at each other and climb up to the Arezaka building to have a passionate S*X with Adam Hammer a few months later, right? After a while, Victor walked out. "The situation is very good. She will wake up in half an hour. As for the dosage of inhibitors, you should know better than me." Victor sat next to Arthur and then looked at David and said with emotion, "Is your son that old?" Arthur nodded and said, "Yeah, more than 10 years have passed. Want a drink?" Arthur took Victor's glass from the side and placed it in front of Victor, then filled a glass of whiskey. Victor picked up the whiskey and took a sip. It was off-duty time and he could drink whatever he wanted. You have to have fun seeing old friends no matter what. Are you really going to go into business? Are you not going to do Cyberpunk anymore? Haven't I already reached the pinnacle? Do I really plan to go to the Arezaka building to have a hard time, and then be sent to the so-called legend by others? It's actually not bad to change the direction. After Arthur picked up the wine glass and took a sip, he sighed. Besides, those who were beaten and killed every day died in the smelly ditches on the street without knowing when. Now that there are children and wives, a little peace of mind is better than anything else. You can think so, I am very happy, and living is more important than anything else. As if he heard something outrageous, Victor picked up his wine glass and touched Arthur's gently, then drank it all in one gulp. Victor has witnessed too many legends of Night City. In other words, it is not that I have witnessed too many legends in Night City, but that I have witnessed those people who fell on the road to becoming legends. Death is like your ex-girlfriend who is unwilling to give up after being dumped. He pursues this group of cyberpunks and will not give up until he achieves his goal. I just came here today to get a prosthetic body, and I will die tomorrow for some nonsense reason. Some people just cursed at the homeless man on the street, and then the other person turned out to be a cyberpsycho and shot him. And then the person dies meaninglessly. Even after death, he was pitiful, with not even a tombstone or anyone to worship him. Just like Johnny Silverhand once was. Now I don't know where the other party is buried. After a while, a cry of pain came from the room, and then Gloria staggered out from behind the curtain. Her memory clearly lingers on the moment of the car accident. David. After murmuring, she saw David sitting on the chair next to him, which made her sigh in relief. Chapter 9. But soon she noticed the person sitting on the other side of the sofa. Gloria narrowed her eyes and looked at Arthur, a face she would never mistake. The bohemian smile on his face, the cigarette hanging from the corner of his mouth, and the playful look in his eyes were still exactly the same as before, without any change. He was wearing a black windbreaker that hadn't been washed for an unknown amount of time. It was dirty, but it didn't seem to have any smell. Isn't this his husband who left Night City for who knows how many years and who died in a smelly ditch? Arthur, UBD, how dare you come back? Having said this, Gloria immediately jumped on Arthur and punched Arthur in the face. Arthur, on the other hand, hugged Gloria tightly and asked her not to move so much. As for Gloria's punch, it didn't hurt Arthur. After all, as a cyberpunk, he is armed to the teeth. A beating from an ordinary person would not hurt him at all. Even passive defense will not be played. This is the so-called steel balloon and steel skin. This kind of expensive thing that only exists in the fantasy world actually appears in Night City, and you can buy it as long as you have money. Gloria's little fists were swinging like Hot Wheels, but Arthur didn't care at all. Finally, when Gloria was about to slap Arthur in the face, Arthur lowered his head slightly and slapped it directly on the mouth. Victor looked on with great embarrassment and poured himself another glass of whiskey. He decided that he must get drunk today. "Jo, what does it feel like after you have finally cured a patient, only to have him feed dog food to you as a doctor as soon as he wakes up?" Victor just wanted to give Arthur the middle finger. After 3 minutes, Arthur finally stopped kissing her, and Gloria lay in Arthur's arms with a red face, not daring to raise her head to look at David next to her. David was dumbfounded as he watched his mother surrender so easily to his father, whom he had not seen for who knows how many years. You must know that in his impression, his mother is a genuine and serious man. It's hard to imagine how strict he is. To David, his mother didn't look like his mother at all, but more like his father. When had he ever seen his mother show such a posture? "Have you had enough trouble?" Arthur asked softly, and Gloria nodded like a kitten and huddled in Arthur's arms. Arthur stood up with Gloria in his arms, then greeted Victor and said, "The bill will be sent directly to my account. If the money is not enough, I will owe it temporarily. You know, I may need money to do something small business." Victor nodded indifferently and waved his hand to indicate that Arthur could leave, and Arthur carried Gloria and David outside. "I'm sorry, it hasn't been easy these years, but I'm back." Arthur patted Gloria's back gently, and Gloria shrank her head tighter after hearing his words. "Humph, I won't forgive you just like that. You're just a BD. You can't say that. After all, I am your savior. Today I saved you again. Can't you commit yourself to me again like you did back then? David opened his eyes wide and opened his mouth. It was the first time that he listened to his mother. Is this how my father chased his mother back then? A soft reply came from his arms. Arthur smiled, and then didn't care. This already meant forgiveness. Women are actually very strange. Sometimes they will make mistakes over and over again on one thing and fall down in the same place over and over again. Of course, it's not just women, but men too. Good morning, Night City. I am your old friend Stanley. Our dream city has begun another long day. I love this city just like you love your mother. The wild introduction style came out from the TV. Gloria gradually woke up from her sleep, finally got up, looked at the time, and immediately started to get dressed in a hurry, planning to go out to work. Arthur came over at this time and hugged her from behind. He held a pneumatic syringe in his hand and inserted it into Gloria's abdomen. I have resigned to you. The prosthetic body has just been replaced and it will take some time to get used to it. After Arthur finished speaking, he let go of his hand. Sometimes you have to know how to let it go. If he hugs her any longer, this angry woman might give her two big mouths. Gloria didn't care that she had been injected with some strange medicine, but said angrily, I don't go to work and you support me. I will support you as long as I support you. I was not the only one raising you before. You are not suitable to go out to earn money to support the family. You are almost going to support yourself to death. Arthur spread his hands and said helplessly, come over and eat. Then Arthur took the lead and walked out. When Gloria came outside, she found that her son David did not go to class. David, why don't you go? Dad said that. David immediately took out his shield. Arthur's mouth twitched slightly and he looked at David. Good guy, didn't you tell me to feed you before? Now when I have a problem, I come right out and talk to my dad. You are really my good son. Without waiting for Gloria to ask, Arthur nodded and sat on the chair and said, there may be a lot that happened in the past 2 days. Let him rest for a while and don't stress too much. After hearing this, Gloria felt that it seemed to make sense. Dad wants to take me to the afterlife bar. Oh? Really? Gloria immediately looked at Arthur with a very dangerous look. Then he stepped hard on Arthur's instep. Arthur watched expressionlessly as Gloria spun around on his feet a few more times before he reacted. Ah, it hurts so much. It's about to break. After seeing this scene, Gloria nodded with satisfaction and let go of her foot on Arthur's instep. Really, you are so old, why do you still act like a little girl? Arthur couldn't help but complain. Although Gloria looked quite young on the outside, in fact, with a teenager like David who was in high school, how could he be so young? That appearance is only preserved through the high technology of this world. Arthur can even find the payment situation from the memory in his mind, because this is what Arthur gave to Gloria. Wedding gifts. What did you say? Gloria quit immediately after hearing this. All girls in the world have one thing in common, that is, they don't like others saying she is old or not good looking. When Arthur heard this, he was immediately startled. He sat up straight and showed a flattering smile. These actions seemed to be completed in an instant, as if they were engraved in the memory of DNA. No, I just want to say that it has been more than 10 years since we last met, and you are still the same little girl you were back then. As he spoke, Arthur stretched out his hand and touched Gloria's face. Gloria's face immediately turned as red as a ripe apple. She lowered her head and slowly ate the bread in her hand that was not made of flour. Chapter 10. By the way, that thing. Gloria seemed to have remembered something and immediately became worried. Because she just stole a prosthetic body from the body of a cyberpsycho not long ago. Thinking of this, Gloria immediately stood up again and began to look around for her yellow coat. I have already taken out what Sin Stan said. How dare man dare to use this kind of junk? He is still the same as before. He is really not afraid of death. Having said this, Arthur showed a strange smile. Generally speaking, there will be no problems with Sin Wiston. After all, this is a mass-produced prosthetic body, and the personnel of the violent terrorist mobile team have large-scale equipment. But this Sin Wiston is completely different. Arthur is very sure that this Sin Wiston is a test subject that escaped from the laboratory. This is what big companies do. When large companies want to develop a very dangerous item, they often recruit a group of experimental subjects from outside. This group of experimental subjects is legal. However, the number of legal experimental subjects is very rare and not comprehensive enough. Basically, they are the old, weak, sick, and disabled. After all, anyone with some ability would not want to be a guinea pig for the company. So at this time, a little bit of small means is needed. You said it was a coincidence, but one of the experimental subjects in the laboratory suddenly got cyberpsychosis and went crazy. He killed himself through the laboratory and ran outside. Then a certain news will spread among the mercenary circles. For example, the company accidentally threw away a certain experimental and powerful prosthetic body. Then certain groups will swarm in like crazy dogs who have seen meat and cannot stop them, desperately trying to grab the company's guinea pigs. These experimental things are usually very unstable, so the person who installs them will only live for a year and a half. After they die, this thing will reappear on the market. At this time, the company can get back the experimental product and obtain the data inside at a small cost. A win-win situation is achieved here. Cyberpunk successfully obtained the power he wanted, and the company completed the experiment it wanted to do reasonably and legally. It's like Qin Shiwang touching the wire, he won't win. After David saw the smile on his cheap dad's face, he was immediately frightened and lowered his head, not daring to observe any more. His father was a cyberpsychopath, and he might give him another big mouth at some point. He didn't know whether he should listen to these things, but he knew that the head of the family had changed. After hearing Arthur's words, Gloria realized that she was no longer alone. My man is sitting right there. When the time comes, let my man teach that BD man a lesson and make him understand who is the boss. Thinking of this, Gloria immediately relaxed, sat back on the chair and looked at Arthur with some worry. Is there really nothing wrong with your body? Arthur shook his head and said, since I died once, the prosthetic body in my body has never had any rejection reaction. I feel like I'm extremely good now. Even Adam Hammer probably won't be as good as me. That's why I came back. Sometimes white lies are important because only in this way can people not get hurt. You just stay at home during this period, take a good rest, and your life will be back on track soon. It's time to move out of this hellish place. This place is just like a garbage dump. Arthur felt a little emotional while eating the bread in his hand. This stuff is real beef bread. It obviously doesn't have any smell, but the fragrant and strong smell outside creates the feeling of wheat bread in your mind. It obviously tastes like eating plastic, but subconsciously you actually think you are eating a piece of bread. The food industry in Night City is really too developed. However, Arthur always felt that he would not be able to bear this. He had to get some real food to eat, rather than these real fruits of modern industry. If he remembered correctly, it seemed like there were real chickens in the voodoo gang. Go get one and try it when the time comes. I have to go out and deliver that thing to man. After Arthur finished eating the bread in his hand, he picked up a piece of paper, wiped his mouth and stood up. After hearing Arthur's words, David immediately stood up, raised his hands, and said like a primary school student, I want to go too. Arthur rolled his eyes immediately. Gloria also immediately slapped herself hard, and the table in front of her made a loud bang. Where are you going? Stay at home and review your homework. If you don't obey me, I will let your father give you a complete childhood. With that said, Gloria directly lifted Arthur's shirt and pointed to the belt tied on Arthur's pants. Arthur didn't pay attention to Gloria's actions, but touched his chin as if he was deep in thought. It seems that now that I am really a father, can I reproduce my childhood for my children? After all, childhood without a belt is incomplete. But in the end Arthur didn't put it into practice. Because this kid David doesn't know anything else, he just knows how to look at faces. After hearing the roar of the Hedong lion from his mother, he immediately became a turtle and didn't even bother to go out. Arthur casually brought a pistol and a small box containing cyanway stan. Before going out, Gloria even helped Arthur tidy up his clothes, looking like a little daughter-in-law. Arthur's heart was racing when he saw it, and he wished he could have an in-depth exchange of learning experiences with him now. But after looking at the size of his house, Arthur felt that he needed to make a lot of money immediately to buy a house where he could study. After a while, Arthur randomly found a neighbor from 6th Street who seemed to be very kind on the street and borrowed a car. Although there was a little conflict, in the simple and honest Night City, this was not considered a problem. What a big deal! Driving towards a corner of Santo Domingo. According to the memory of the original owner, man actually has a certain relationship with the original owner. To put it simply, man was introduced to the cyberpunk industry by Arthur. Just when Arthur Scott was slowly getting back to his old place, a phone call came in suddenly. Looking at the picture on the caller ID, Arthur smiled and answered the call without hesitation. Chapter 11. Hey, I heard that the old captain's sailors have crawled back from hell. They are really making a big fuss and showing off their power. The scavengers are going crazy and are looking for the cyber lunatic from last night. Dear Captain, your sailor has finally climbed out of that quagmire. I am still short of funds for the time being. If you are alive, you can come to me. The name of the caller was Muammar Reyes. Speaking of this name, not many people in Night City actually knew it. Because in fact, he also has a more well-known name called Old Captain. He is the most famous middleman here in Santo Domingo. Arthur and Man used to live under his hands. Although the other party is not a good person, and there are no good people in Night City, the Old Captain is pretty good among all the middlemen. At the very least, he won't deliberately conceal certain information, just say what it is, and he won't be in arrears with mission funds. Of course, as a middleman, he certainly made a lot of money, and the commission ratio was actually quite high. But what does it matter? To be a gangster, you must have beer to drink. This is a must. If you don't like it, you can do it yourself. When you meet people who are willing to blow your head off for €1, the Old Captain will sit in his car and watch the show with a wicked smile. You also know that you have just returned to Night City. The last time you were active was more than 10 years ago. It will take a long time for others to trust you, an old guy, again. I will try my best to find it for you. Suitable and alive. Arthur didn't think there was anything surprising. Cyberpunk in Night City is updated very quickly, and a batch will basically rotate every few months. So no one will deliberately remember the names of these cyberpunks, because it is useless to remember them. Even if you save the other party's phone number, the other party's parts may appear on the black market half a month later. It is actually very rare for people like Arthur to live for such a long time. Please, Cyberpunk Living Fossil has a lot of experience to ensure the completion rate of the mission. Those people really have no vision. By the way, Old Captain, I have just returned to Night City and need a means of transportation. Do you have any good ones there? After hearing Arthur's words, the Old Captain smiled heartily. He seemed to be in a good mood to see his old friend still alive. No problem, but there is no default here, Old Captain. I will send you the list later. You can choose for yourself. Keep in touch, Arthur. Soon the call was hung up and Arthur arrived at his destination. This is an area composed of several abandoned warehouses. The outside is as rotten as a garbage dump. The rolling shutter doors are covered with rust. There is also a disgusting smell of industrial waste gas and garbage in the air. But it's not without its advantages, that is, basically no one will come to such a ghost place. Another advantage is that it is big enough. Even if you shoot here, no one will cause trouble for you. Arthur silently took out a cigarette and lit it for himself. Taking the long box, he walked to the rolling shutter door and knocked a few times. "Hello, takeaway from hell." While Arthur was waiting, a voice suddenly came from behind him. "Takeaway? What takeout?" As soon as the slightly muscular and hoarse boy came up, he thought from Arthur's back. At the same time, Arthur could feel a cold touch coming from his waist. Arthur didn't panic at all, even though he knew that what was pressed against his waist was a powerful weapon. He took the cigarette from his mouth as long as he could, and the next moment it was as if time stopped. The smoke rose slowly in the air, incredibly slowly. Arthur quietly put the cigarette back into his mouth, turned his head, and saw that one of the hands of a big man had changed shape, and the small missile inside was ready to go. Arthur blinked and slowly shifted his position, took out a pistol from his waist and pressed it against the strong man's lower back. The next moment, time returned to its flowing state, and Arthur's movements just now seemed to move instantaneously, so fast that it felt unbelievable. The takeaway from hell, of course. Man felt like he was breaking out in a cold sweat. There was no cyanwiston on him. But as an experienced cyberpunk, he has realized that he seemed to have offended someone he shouldn't have just offended. "Friend, if something happens, how about we sit down and talk about it? I told you a long time ago, don't be so impulsive when doing things. Sooner or later, the price of impulsiveness will kick you hard, but you just don't listen. I really don't understand how you survived in this shit pit." Arthur said contemptuously and then took back his pistol. He turned the pistol in a circle in his hand and stuffed it back into his waist. After taking a silent drag on the cigarette, Man turned around and threw the box in his hand to him. Man subconsciously took the box and had time to look at the man in front of him. I don't know why the voice just now, or the appearance of the other person, always feels very familiar, as if I have seen it somewhere before. But since the other party didn't take action, it meant that he was not an enemy. This also gave Man a sigh of relief. Finally, Man rummaged through his memory and found this person, and his eyes slowly widened. "Arthur? UBD is not dead. Where have you been for more than 10 years? I haven't seen you for more than 10 years, and you plan to chat with me here." Arthur looked at the surrounding environment and really didn't want to stay here any longer. Man also responded, nodded, and then opened the rolling shutter door of the warehouse and said, "Come in and have a good chat with me about how you crawled out of hell." Afterwards, Arthur sat in his seat, picked up the glass of wine that Man poured for him, took a sip and nodded with satisfaction. At least it's not fake wine, it's authentic whiskey anyway. It's not the kind made with industrial alcohol. "Is your illness really cured?" Man seemed a little excited, but Arthur could sense that the other man's excitement was not just because of his return. The whole room was a little dim, but Arthur didn't care. The high-level prosthesis on his body could ensure that he could maintain his vision in any environment. Arthur touched his chin, looked at Man with a little teasing and said, "Satan can be cured after a few days of work. I am also working for him now. Look at the box in your hand. He asked me to give it to you." Man opened the box in his hand and found a spinal prosthesis inside. It was the cyanwiston he ordered from Gloria. Chapter 12. Man immediately understood what Arthur wanted to say. After a moment of silence, Man took a deep breath and then said, "I can't stop. I must become a well-known big shot." Arthur took a deep drag on the cigarette in his hand, then threw it to the ground and kicked it away with his foot. In this dim environment, Arthur stared at Man, believing that Man should be able to see his eyes. Although those were the experiences and memories of the original owner, Arthur had to admit that he was indeed affected by those things, because those things seemed to have been experienced by him personally. Again, famous and unknown. But if I say that this Silen Weston is a test product that came out of the laboratory, and installing it is equivalent to being played like a guinea pig by the company, how should you respond? Arthur calmed down, took out the cigarette case from his pocket again, lit one for himself, and looked at Man quietly. Hot. These damn corporate dogs are always doing this stuff. Boom. Man threw the box aside fiercely, and then punched the table, directly punching a hole in the stainless steel table. His eyes were red, and he looked like he was extremely angry. As an experienced cyberpunk, Man had already figured out all the twists and turns just by listening to Arthur's casual words. Because this is not the first time this kind of thing has happened in Night City. But as the saying goes, if the strategy is bad, it just needs to work. As long as this kind of thing is thrown out, there will always be cyberpunks who are not afraid of death and want to give it a try, firmly believing that they are not ordinary people, but the chosen ones. But fortunately, he did not lose his mind, because this Xian Weston is a rare treasure after all. To some cyberpunks, it is like the Mutuo in the Ritz bar, which makes people want to stop. It's just a matter of saying something to take action. Although he really wants to become stronger, he doesn't want to be the company's guinea pig. Because these are two different things. Even if he really becomes a cyberpsychotic after pretending to be Sean Weston, it is better than being a corporate guinea pig. At least cyberpsychosis is free. At this moment, the sound of the rolling shutter door being closed came from outside. After a while, the door to the room where Man and Arthur were chatting was opened. A group of people filed in, led by a woman who was stronger than a bear. Oh, there are actually guests today. The strong woman was stunned for a moment after seeing Arthur, and nodded casually, which was regarded as a greeting. Obviously, she did not recognize Arthur. After all, the last time she met Arthur was more than 10 years ago. Dorio, it's been a long time since I saw your chest muscles. They are getting more and more developed. Isn't it possible that you can punch Man to death now? Dorio originally wanted to sit next to Man, but was obviously stunned after hearing Arthur's words. Looking at Arthur's familiar face and his arrogance, he was holding a cigarette and not caring about the tense atmosphere of the scene. Arthur? UBD didn't die outside yet, God is so disgusting. After Dorio recognized him, she said with a smile, stopped sitting next to Man, came to Arthur and punched him in the chest, then poured herself a glass of wine, touched Arthur, and drank. All. Man next to him suddenly showed an extremely resentful expression. It was as if Arthur had stolen his wife away. Arthur didn't care at all, he had never been interested in Dorio, and he couldn't tolerate such a strong woman. Isn't his wife Gloria delicious? At this time, Man pointed to the people who came in with Dorio and introduced them to Arthur. This is our team's gunner Rebecca, mechanical expert Pila, network hacker Kiwei and Lucy. The people who were introduced nodded to Arthur, but did not speak, because they did not know who Arthur was. Although he looks very familiar with Man and the others, whether he can completely trust him is his own opinion, not something imposed on him by others. Arthur picked up the wine glass, took a sip gently, stood up, and said with a smile, "The team is good, Man. I have just returned to Night City, and I have to get a car later, and there is one more thing. There are other things to do and it's quite a hassle to deal with, so that's it for today and remember to stay in touch." After saying that, Arthur said hello to Man and prepared to leave. Before leaving, he glanced at Lucy and stretched out his hand, touching her rainbow head. "I have to say it feels really good. Not even talking about Man, you are getting more and more BD, and you even accept children." Lucy was stunned on the spot. She didn't understand why she was suddenly touched and killed. She froze for a moment without any reaction at all. "You fart. I wasn't a kid back then, so you still took me into the punk industry. Why didn't you say you pity me and send me to study?" After touching it, Arthur ignored Man's words and instead focused his gaze on Rebecca's head. Rebecca suddenly felt like she was going crazy. She took out 2 pink pistols from behind her and pointed them directly at Arthur. "A-hole, if you dare to touch my head, I will punch dozens or 20 holes in your body." Arthur scratched the back of his head in embarrassment, talking to himself as he walked outside. Well, more than 10 years have passed, and children have become less and less cute. It's not like Man, who could pat his head casually back then. After saying that, Arthur closed the door to the room, and Lucy reacted. She took out a pistol from her waist, turned it around in her hand, and then chased Arthur out of the room. Man and Dorio had no intention of chasing them out. Kiwei, who was next to them, found a place casually after seeing the 2 of them not moving, and just sat there motionless. After pouring herself a glass of wine, Kiwei said, "Don't worry about it. Lucy might really kill him." Man shrugged and pushed up the sunglasses on his face. Dolio, who was next to her, crossed her legs, picked up the wine glass and took another sip of wine. Arthur will be merciful. He has always been tolerant of children. While Dorio was about to reach out and touch Man's head, Man immediately became furious and directly opened Dorio's hand and said, "How can a man's head be touched casually? I couldn't resist before. That BD, otherwise I will definitely break his legs." Chapter 13. Show. You were the one who robbed my brother's car. You actually robbed our 6th Street gang of supplies. I think you want to commit treason. Kneel down under this Stars and Stripes flag and apologize immediately, UBD. Arthur had just left the secret base like a garage when he saw a group of people chattering around outside. Many people were wearing camouflage clothing and body armor, looking like soldiers. However, it feels a bit careless to say that they are soldiers, because most of them have large tattoos on their bodies, wear sunglasses, and have a cigarette in their mouths. They look carefree, and they look like energetic young men. The 6th Street Gang is actually a gang composed of a group of post-war veterans. In the beginning, it was actually to maintain law and order. The law and order in Night City was really bad. NCPD officers don't care about these things. They only get a cup of coffee every day when they go to work, then drive to a certain street and drink it directly until get off work. Since others don't care, that group of people will start to take care of these things themselves. So a group of post-war veterans gathered together to maintain law and order. It's just that the Dragon Slayer eventually became an evil dragon, and that was also the case. Later, as more and more new members joined, the entire organization fell into the abyss. There is no big difference between what other gangs do and what the 6th Street Gang does, except that their costumes still continue the same style as before, so everyone is dressed like a soldier. Why do I hear that your tone of voice smells like a stick? How come you don't look like an authentic old bald eagle? Arthur touched his chin and complained silently. At this moment, Lucy also ran out of the door, holding a small pistol in his hand. He was immediately embarrassed when he saw the scene outside. Can I say that I was just passing by? I really have no relationship with him at all. Zixi hurriedly explained that it was a pity that the brothers of the 6th Street Gang did not want to talk to Lucy about these things. In the meantime, Arthur's good neighbor, the member whose car was robbed by Arthur, stood up directly. His face turned red from suppressing it, and he stretched out a finger like ketchup, pointing at Arthur tremblingly. "A-hole, you took my car and picked up such a beautiful girl." After Arthur heard this, he felt a little disappointed, then he rolled over and took Lucy into the garage. There is a car parked in the garage, which can be used as a bunker. After seeing Arthur's actions, the members of the 6th Order Gang stopped chatting and directly raised their rifles and began to attack crazily. The bang 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 was like setting off firecrackers for a moment, and everything was filled with a festive atmosphere. Arthur smelled the smell of gunpowder smoke in the air and couldn't help but sigh. It's 2076, why are they still using rifles made of traditional gunpowder? Lucy squatted next to Arthur and complained, how did you get into trouble with these lunatics? What do you mean by provoking these lunatics? When I borrowed the car from that BD, he was obviously very happy. He even filled up the gas for me before leaving. Who knew he would go back on his word and suddenly refuse to admit it? Arthur retorted angrily, then took out his pistol from his waist and handed it to Lucy next to him. Take it, what's the use of your little pistol? Lucy took the pistol, was stunned for a moment and said, what about you? Arthur shrugged his shoulders, then stretched out his hand and punched the ground hard. The ground suddenly cracked. Arthur lifted up a side of the floor, picked up a black box from below and threw it beside. Lucy looked dumbfounded. It had not been a day or two since she joined Man's team. Why didn't she know there were backup hidden weapons here? Arthur opened the box directly, took out a long pole from inside, showed 8 teeth to Lucy and said, I can do whatever I want. Lucy was immediately speechless. If he read correctly, the opponent's weapon should be called an RPG, right? How many years ago is this antique? It's older than you. Uncle, you don't want to use this kind of thing, it might explode. Arthur took out the cannonball from the box, stuffed it into the long pole, assembled it and said, I made it myself and buried it. The next moment, the environment in Arthur's eyes suddenly slowed down, and his nerves were accelerated by the prosthetic body behind him. Arthur picked up the RPG and stood up, pulled the trigger, and then time resumed. Boom! Almost instantly, Arthur squatted down, and then there were violent explosions and painful cries from outside. The storm caused by the explosion blew in, causing Lucy's hair to flutter everywhere, while Arthur blew out a puff of smoke. Weapons are the same as the age of humans. The older they get, the better they become. Lucy rolled her eyes and threw the pistol she was holding back to Arthur. At this moment, the door was opened, and Man slowly walked out. After looking at the environment, he fell silent. Then Man's eyes turned red, his hands trembled, and he looked like he was about to enter a cyberpsychotic state. Just when Arthur was thinking about whether to call the terrorist mobile unit in time, Man suddenly pounced on the car like a dog pooping on shit. A-hole! This is the car I just bought. The loan hasn't been paid off yet. What did you do, UBD? Arthur touched his nose a little coquettishly and said to Lucy next to him, we'll talk to you next time. Uncle, I'll leave first if I have something to do. A-hole, you still want to leave? Pay me compensation. The next moment, he slowly heard Arthur's words, stood up from where he was, and pounced on Arthur fiercely. Unfortunately, it only took a moment for Arthur to disappear from Lucy's side. When he appeared again, he was already outside the garage door. Lucy looked at Arthur and Arthur not far away with some surprise, waved to her, and then disappeared completely. Lucy silently took out a pack of women's cigarettes from her pocket, lit one for herself, and took a deep breath before she came to her senses. This guy doesn't look like an antique at all, does he? Such an unreliable character. Is he really 40 or 50 years old? Man felt a little heartbroken at this time. He touched his car and thought about the 30 installments of the loan, which made him even more heartbroken. After hearing Lucy's words, Man couldn't help but shook his head. That guy has such an unreliable character. At first I thought he looked a bit like Morgan Blackhand, so I followed him. As a result, I went hungry twice in 3 days after following him. Dorio also walked out slowly at this time, with one hand in his trouser pocket and the other holding a glass of whiskey. Although it sounds unreliable, Arthur is actually very reliable and a very trustworthy person. He will never abandon his companions. He values friendship and righteousness. He doesn't pay special attention to money. As long as he likes you, even if you are a child, and I am willing to support you. After Lucy heard this, she took a puff of cigarette silently, then exhaled it, and said again, it sounds like the kind of fool who never appears in Night City. Chapter 14. Hey, my sailor, you don't seem to be interested in the work I do here. What a bunch of blind bastards. Arthur had just left man's base and was driving on the viaduct when he received a call from the old captain. Obviously, Arthur has not been active in Night City for a long time, and no one would trust a cyberpunk antique that should be buried in a cesspit. Well, I understand that this kind of thing will happen slowly. Don't worry about me. In the worst case, you can go find my Aunt Rog. I bet the Queen in the next life will give you your favorite mouthful if she hears you call her aunt. You can't say that. Given her age, I can give her face by calling her aunt. In fact, I should call her grandma. Okay, although I don't have a job for you here, there is a righteous partner who is very interested in you. I have given her your contact information and I believe she will contact you soon. Arthur hung up the phone and touched his chin. Before he could think about anything, a call came in again. Arthur answered decisively, and a female voice came from the other side. Hey, Arthur. I'm Regina Jones. I heard you were looking for a job, and I happen to be one of the employers here. Arthur suddenly understood after hearing the other party's name. No wonder it's called the Partner of Justice. Isn't this the middleman in the Watson district in the game? If you don't mind that I'm an old man, I'd be willing to help. You can't say that. Sometimes people with rich experience will take commissions more seriously. Arthur sounded like a good guy. How long had it been since he had heard such pleasant words in Night City? Night City, this ghost place, is truly a place filled with outstanding people, singing birds, and fragrant flowers. If you bump into someone randomly on the roadside, he will dare to greet your 18th generation ancestors. If you dare to talk back, he will dare to fight with you on the street. The main theme is to act according to nature, which is simply outrageous. Can't there be more flattery in the communication between people? If I were in front of you, I would definitely give you a hug. Is there any work for me, ma'am? To be honest, I want to start a new business recently, but new students also need to have funds to start a business. Arthur doesn't have much money in his hands now. It's extremely difficult to rent a factory in Night City, a place where land is at a premium. The housing prices in Night City are going to skyrocket unless Arthur is willing to go to Taipingzhou. But Arthur is unwilling to go to that ghost place, because there is a group of human beings there who are planning how to eliminate humans and make themselves gods. Regina was obviously stunned after hearing Arthur's words. Why didn't the person on the other side play his cards according to the routine? Shouldn't the middleman and the mercenary be reconciled after meeting? At least talk about life ideals and the like. But when I heard that the other party was short of money, it was clear. Night City, a ghost place like this, could have nothing but money. Have you ever heard of cyberpsychosis? I've heard of it. Oh? Where have you heard how much is known about this disease? No one knows cyberpsychosis better than me. Arthur parked the car on the side of the road and played an accordion with both hands. It was a pity that Regina called him instead of standing in front of him. Otherwise, Regina would definitely have praised Arthur's description. After all, this look was somewhat sick. Arthur, do you really know that much about cyberpsychosis? Where did you do your research? Regina suddenly felt that she was a little unsure about this old antique. The reason why she came to Arthur was because she felt that an old man like Arthur must have more experience and be able to complete the task better. After all, she was looking for those lunatics to cure them, not to kill them. Weak cyberpunks don't have enough experience. They might be chopped into 8 pieces by those madmen, minced into meat, and then made into spicy chicken drumsticks. If the strength is too strong, then the cyberpunks will become one-sided, and maybe they will chop the cybermaniac into 8 pieces. When I was doing research in Night City more than 10 years ago, the subject of the research was myself. After hearing Arthur's words, Regina fell silent, and the atmosphere turned awkward for a moment. After a while, Regina continued to speak. Arthur, you are so funny. Arthur smiled and didn't explain too much, and then Regina directly told him the task she wanted to give to Arthur. Then let's get straight to the point. Someone recently saw a slovenly homeless man in the North District of Watson. He looked in a daze, as if he had been charged dozens of times. At first I thought the other person might have overdosed on Shining, until the other person acted like a mad dog and beat the head of a kind person who gave him food into a pulp. Since the other party is your patient, I plan to give this task to you. Remember to capture as many people as possible alive, even if they turn into human sticks. After Arthur heard about this mission, he couldn't help but slap his mouth. Sure enough, the partners of justice are different. You must know that in the Night City, cyberpunks and other lunatics usually only have one end, and that is for people who are excited by violent terror to be stuffed into a manure pit and drowned. As long as you are a normal person, you will not want to come into contact with a cybermaniac. Okay, I will try my best to keep this patient, whom I have never met, in good health and keep in touch. After saying that, Arthur hung up the phone and drove directly towards Watson North District. The Watson District is not a nice place. Watson North is even less of a good place. This was once the heart of Night City's beating heart. Nightclubs, skyscrapers, and even the top medical centers are all here. But a financial crisis destroyed everything, and to this day, this is still the poorest area in the entire Night City. What, you mean Taiping, Zhou? Taiping State does not belong to Night City, and the same bad land does not belong to Night City. This was not said by Arthur, but by the mayor of Night City. The reason for this operation is mainly to reduce the crime rate in Night City, which is soaring like an 80-year-old grandfather's high blood pressure. If I can't solve the problem of crime rate, then I will solve the problem where crime occurs. This is simply a genius idea. Every time he thought about this kind of place, Arthur couldn't help but praise the mayor of Night City. He was indeed a very qualified politician. Soon, Arthur's car passed through Night City's pretty good transportation network and arrived at Watson North District, where he started wandering around. There are factories everywhere here, and if you smell the smell of exhaust gas in the air, you can live an extra 3,000 years, but lose 3 years of your life. Chapter 15. To be honest, it is not easy to find a cyber lunatic in a place as large as Watson North District. According to Arthur's understanding of his condition. Generally speaking, there are some cybermaniacs who are very crazy and some who are not very crazy. If it is a very crazy kind, then this kind of cyber lunatic will kill everywhere and will never stop until it is destroyed. Of course, this kind of person will not be saved by Arthur. The terrorist mobile team will personally save his fallen soul. There is another type of lunatic who is a relatively normal lunatic. As long as you don't stimulate him, he will stay where he should be like a piece of wood, or repeat some of his obsessions. Fortunately, Regina is a relatively reliable middleman. As a partner of justice, she seems to have her own hacker team. The other party provided Arthur with the location of the cyberpunk very accurately. Arthur had just parked his car next to him when he saw a bald old man in a trench coat with more than 100 years of experience as a programmer standing motionless on the top of the container, holding his own customized super invincible cyclone spiral in his hands. Steel cannon. Before Arthur could speak, a faint voice came from in front of the old man. The pedestrians on the street turned a blind eye, as if they hadn't seen anything, and continued their lives that had their souls taken away by the Night City. Arthur came to the container with a cigarette in his mouth, climbed up with just a slight jump. Arthur quickly came to the programmer brother's side, and after taking a deep breath of cigarette, he suppressed the smell coming from the other man's body. Brother, I'm not telling you that we cyber lunatics must pay attention to our physical hygiene. I think you and I are also destined. Why don't I find you a foot washing city and provide a one-stop service, or you can go and do it yourself. The smell on your body. I told you that I came here this time. Actually, there is a girl who has fallen in love with you. Although she is blind in one eye and occasionally dances with guns, she has a hot figure and a sweet voice. You don't be ungrateful. Arthur stood beside the programmer brother and babbled, but the man seemed not to hear anything and continued to flutter his super invincible whirlwind spiral steel cannon in the wind. This old man seemed to understand Arthur's words, as drool drooled from the corner of his mouth and he kept mumbling something. The people around him couldn't help but turn their eyes to Arthur. It seemed that in this numb night city, only hot beauties with big butts could attract the attention of these people. Arthur waved his hands at the people around him and said, "What are you looking at? I wonder if this is a cyberpsychosis? I think you just want to die. Believe it or not, wait a minute, this guy will drop a missile on the whole block. Do you need to fry a small piece?" The people around him curled their lips, but did not speak. They turned their heads back and continued their numb lives. If there are people who are not afraid of death, soon, a man dressed in a dark rock style will stand out from the crowd. "Uncle, where is the big-assed beauty with one eye you just mentioned? Why would you introduce him to such an old man? His prosthetic body is probably older than you, and you're not afraid of exploding, so you might as well introduce him to me." The people around him, who were still numb at first, suddenly burst into laughter after hearing this person's words. He didn't leave either, just stood there and watched the excitement. Arthur's mouth twitched slightly after hearing this. If he really dared to introduce the member of the Uzumaki gang in front of him to Regina, he probably wouldn't have to think about getting a commission from him in the future. The old man next to him seemed to become a little unhappy after hearing what the Uzumaki gang member said. Those pupils were beating like an electrocardiogram in the hospital. When Arthur saw this, he patted the old man on the shoulder and said to the young man from the Whirlpool gang, "You're done. You made my old man angry. My brother wants to teach you a lesson now, let you see if his little steel cannon can do it." The member of the Uzumaki gang almost laughed out loud when he heard this. How strong can this old man wearing a windbreaker and shirtless in front of him be? Also teach yourself a lesson? Don't you know that I am a member of the Uzumaki gang? What's more, this old man looked crazy, and it wasn't the first time he saw this old man peeing in this area. In the past, he didn't want to meddle in other people's business, but now he just wants to be a hero of Night City and help Night City get rid of the bad habit of open defecation. The people around him who were in the same gang as him immediately realized that something was wrong and began to slowly gather around the boy from the Uzumaki gang. Arthur looked at the group of grotesque deformities in front of him and scratched the back of his head. He just couldn't understand why so many people in this world wanted to die on their own initiative. Although the Uzumaki gang is keen on transformation, they are only keen on transformation. I don't know how many years ago the items on his body were, and they might be older than some of the items on Arthur's body. Wanting to have a fight with my fellow patient is simply a fool's errand. Being stared at by dozens of pairs of eyes from 7 or 8 people, the pupils of Arthur's patient brother's eyes fluctuated faster and faster, and became more irregular. Arthur silently took a step back, then jumped off the container and walked to the side. Finally, he took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, silently lit one for himself and took a deep drag. "As long as you can convince me, this old man, I will introduce that beauty to you, and it will be treated as a friend." As he spoke, Arthur pointed in the direction of the young man from the Uzumaki gang, and immediately became energetic. It's not how stupid he is, nor how shrewd Arthur's lies are. The main reason is that the synapses in the brains of these members of the Uzumaki gang are about to be burned into knots, and even if they want to work hard, they can't. This is what you said, as long as I convince you, brother, you will introduce me to a beautiful girl, right? Arthur nodded and said nonchalantly, "No problem. If he doesn't want to, then I can take you to Twisted Street. It's my treat. I guarantee you will be satisfied. If you are not satisfied, do it again." That guy from the Uzumaki gang was almost laughing his head off. He didn't expect that he would go out and step on shit today, and he would have such bad luck. This good guy, just walking on the street, he can meet someone and ask him to go to Twisted Street to be cool. If he had this kind of good luck every day, he would be willing to step on shit every day. Chapter 16. Fatal mistakes often come from one's own arrogance. Arthur squinted his eyes, holding a cigarette in his hand, watching the fate of others towards his own end. This kind of thing doesn't happen too much in Night City. Arthur doesn't think there's anything wrong with doing this. Sometimes he's even happy to give it a try. Because there may be good people in this city, but they will definitely not be gang members. Although removing 1 or 2 scumbags would not make the city a better place, Arthur thought he was not that great either. But if 2 scumbags are removed, maybe some people's lives will become better. Not enough? This is enough. Hey, old man, did you hear that? Hurry up and tell your little brother that you don't want that big-assed beauty anymore. I still have time to go to Twisted Street to have some fun. Words that did not know whether to live or die came from the mouth of the member of the Uzumaki gang. The group of people around him were also laughing and scolding Arthur's fellow patient. What he didn't notice was that the pupils in the opponent's eyes were beating more frequently and irregularly, and the aura on his body became colder, more chaotic, and more inhumane. But Arthur can feel it. He can feel that the old man standing in front of him is no longer a person, but a real killing machine. The soul in his body has been completely extracted. It is absolutely impossible. There is a possibility of redemption. The danger is right in front of us, but unfortunately most people can't see it. The boy from the Uzumaki gang, who wore a mohawk and wore dark rock-style clothes, had climbed onto the container and stood next to Arthur's patient. The other party even imitated Arthur's behavior and kept patting the elder brother's shoulders. Arthur smoked silently, and he could feel that King Yama was wondering why there were several figures flickering in his Yama palace, as if there was some bug. King Yama may not know that this style has a new name called Cyberpunk style. Maybe it's time for Yama to integrate with the real world. Boom. The next moment in Arthur's line of sight, it seemed as if his line of sight had stopped. The head of the Whirlpool gang guy exploded like a watermelon being hit by a rifle bullet, and all this happened from Arthur's perspective. It's like being captured in slow motion by a high-speed camera. Arthur could clearly see every drop of blood flying, every drop of brain flying up and down. He could even see that the face of the Uzumaki gang boy was slowly disintegrating, eventually becoming beyond recognition and turning into a headless corpse. A-hole! What are you doing? After seeing this scene, the surrounding members of the Uzumaki gang did not realize the arrival of death at all. They were like the enraged mad dog running towards the container. The prosthetic body was urged to the extreme, and there was a lot more in their hands. Weapons. The surrounding crowd began to spread quickly amidst screams, as fast as if they had been rehearsed in advance. I don't know whether their skillful movements are lucky or unlucky. They were lucky because they ran fast enough and this cyber madman probably wouldn't hurt innocent people. They said they didn't believe it because they were able to be so proficient without any prior practice. Da-da-da. Bang bang bang. Suddenly, bullets poured out like rain in the sky of Night City. The torrent of steel ravaged the entire container terminal. Arthur was not affected at all, nor was the fellow patient who stood on the container and stared blankly like an idiot. The next moment, the patient raised his right hand. Almost instantly, the shape of his right hand changed. A huge muzzle protruded from his arm. This was a miniature missile launcher prosthesis. Man's favorite. Call out. The moment he raised his hand without aiming, and the moment he set up the prosthetic body in his hand, the missile was already launched from the muzzle. The missile advanced with flames, just like the god of death carrying his own sickle and blasting directly into the crowd. Boom! The fire brought by the explosion illuminated almost half a block. Although it was daytime, the situation here could be seen from half a block away. When Arthur saw this, he couldn't help but suck his teeth. Sure enough, these cyber lunatics are willing to install anything on themselves. This thing should at least be a prosthetic body in the laboratory. And it is definitely experimental, because even if it is for military use, it cannot have such power. Is it really the fault of the company dog again? It's really a sinful place. Arthur leaned against the container, stood upright, and then began to walk slowly towards the direction of his fellow patient. Thanks to the missile just now, there are basically no living people from the Whirlpool gang around. But apparently Arthur underestimated the vitality brought about by full-body prosthetic transformation. A-hole! We have no grievances against you, why did you lie to us? After hearing the sound, Arthur turned his head and looked at the head lying on the ground. It was one of the people he had tricked into angering his fellow patient. Arthur spat directly in his face, then stepped on his head and looked him in the eyes. Because it's fun, because I'm bored, or maybe I just think you're easier to cheat and fool. After hearing Arthur's words, the head suddenly widened its eyes and said in disbelief and full of horror, Cyber Madman. Cyber Madman. I think you are the real Cyber Madman. Show. What a bad luck. Pfft. The next moment, Arthur stepped down hard with his foot, and his whole head instantly turned into a lump of plasma. He smoked silently and looked at the patient who was still standing on the top of the container not far away. The other party was not looking at him, and the little pause just now was just for aiming. The next moment, the patient's hand was raised directly. The wrist was folded 90 degrees, and the muzzle of the gun was directly exposed. Da-da-da! Bullets poured out as the fire snake swallowed, and Arthur silently exhaled a puff of smoke. The next moment, time in the entire space seemed to be suspended. Arthur threw the cigarette in his hand aside, clenched his hands into fists, stretched them downwards, and the two mantis knives were instantly ejected. The sharp blade shone with a cold light, and there were neon colors on it, which was extremely conspicuous even in the daytime. During the time he was slowed down, Arthur dodged to the side at will and completely dodged the bullet. With a slight force on his legs, his whole body was ejected instantly like a cannon being ejected from the chamber. The patient's eyes followed Arthur's movements, but his body was not strong enough to support him in moving as far as his nerves could reach. Arthur appeared behind the patient, with the mantis knife in his hand already placed on his shoulder. I see that these arms of yours are not original, so just chop them off. This thing is too much of a burden on you. Maybe it will get better after cutting it off. If you wake up in the future, remember to pay my medical expenses. Chapter 17. The next moment, the mantis knife on Arthur's hands was quickly pushed forward, splitting the opponent's limbs in two directly from his shoulders. There was no blood flowing out, and there was no so-called bone or flesh. There was just a wire, some silicone and metal tubes, and some blue stuff that looked like coolant. Zhou, this transformation is deeper than mine. You are even crazier than I was before. Arthur couldn't help but complain. The mantis knife on his hands did not stop, but went directly towards the opponent's lower body. It was just a cross. The mantis knife cut across two big hairy legs in an instant, and then the flow of time returning to normal, the patient fell to the ground like a human stick. Arthur shook his hands, put away the mantis knife, silently took out a cigarette from his pocket, threw it into his mouth and lit it. After taking a silent breath, he jumped down from the container, stepped on the patient's body, took out a data cable from his wrist, and directly connected it to the brain of the patient. Well, let me see. Hey? I almost forgot. You have to unplug this network module, otherwise I can't do it. Arthur is not actually a hacker, but he can still learn some things through life and death every day. Moreover, some hackers will also sell some customized products, which are foolproof operations and do not require knowledge of anything or special modifications. Hey? Cybermaniac actually has mutual recording equipment installed on him? You really put everything in it, bro. For the sake of my little brother helping you like this, the things recorded on your mutual equipment belong to me. Arthur couldn't help but sigh, and directly used the data cable to copy all the recorded videos on the other party. This is a good thing. There are always some crazy people in Night City who like to see these bloody things. Find a good mutuo editor to deal with it a little, and then this thing can be sold for a big price. By the way, you can also take it back and give it to your great son to experience, so that he will not want to kill you all day long. It is also time to let him know how terrible it is to have a father. Regina, once the matter is settled, you can directly locate my location and send a car to take this patient away. The northern industrial area of Watson is about to explode. The terrorist mobile team is now eager to stuff you and your fellow patient into the toilet and drown them. Hurry up and take your fellow patient to another place. The address of the safe house has been sent. Here you go, see the attachment for details. The call had just been dialed, Arthur had just finished speaking, and Regina, who still wanted to talk about the reward, was firing like a machine gun. Then Arthur wanted to complain about how the terrorist mobile team and the Night City government could never be so efficient, when suddenly there was a roar of engines in the sky. Look up, okay. The aerial vehicle has arrived in the sky above this small distribution center. Several young men, all dressed in black and with several purple blue light strips, are looking at this side from the open door of the aerial vehicle. Arthur took one look and understood that it was the same kind of aura, and it was a group of cyber-psychopaths. Speaking of which, if she caught these cyber-psychotics to Regina, could she reward her? Arthur believes that the members of the terrorist mobile team are far more valuable for research than ordinary cyber-psychopaths, because this group of psychopaths will never hold their own super-invincible spiral tornado small steel cannon like the patient in his hand. Stand in front of a large crowd and boo. Although she is very greedy, Regina will definitely not pay for this, so she should run away first. Arthur directly dragged the old patient who had been cut into a stick by himself and got into the car next to him that was given to him by a friendly neighbor from the 6th Street gang. Throwing my brother into the back seat, he got into the driver's seat. As soon as the door was closed, he stepped on the accelerator, and with a roar, the vehicle started running at top speed. How could the violent terrorist mobile team in the sky give up on them like this? But they were the mad dogs in the NCPD. The rope around this mad dog's neck has been removed. How can he live up to his name as a mad dog if he doesn't bite two people? So the float vehicle quickly realized a soul drift in the air, and quickly caught up with Arthur from the air. The corner of Arthur's mouth twitched, and he almost didn't press the accelerator under his foot into the engine. But this car is not a super sports car, it is just an ordinary family car, which is bigger than the grotto. Leah's little old car was a little better. Even if Arthur really stepped on the accelerator into the engine, the car wouldn't go any faster. Joe, I'm a victim too, okay? Why are you always chasing me? Why don't you throw the patient brother out, so maybe they will let me go? Arthur stepped on the accelerator, slapped the steering wheel hard, and glared fiercely at his fellow patient lying in the back seat. It's just that the patient's mental state was not normal. He didn't seem to hear Arthur's words clearly. He was lying quietly on the back seat like a salted fish that couldn't turn over, with a lot of saliva flowing out of the corner of his mouth. It seems that the dementia is getting worse. Just as Arthur was running for his life, there was a call suddenly. He came in and looked at the phone. The information on it was indeed a bit strange. Arthur couldn't remember when he'd added someone like this. Although I am on the run for my life now, I can still leave a last word for others. Hey, here is the stinking shit that God picked up from the cesspit, but it will be thrown back into the cesspit soon. If you come to chat with me, then the fee I charge is on my epitaph. Carve a middle finger. As soon as the call was connected, Arthur couldn't wait to vent his emotions like a barrage. After a long moment of silence on the other end of the phone, a clear female voice came. Okay, Mr. Shit, this is Inspector Melissa of the terrorist mobile team who has been reborn for a long time. I will follow your advice and carve a middle finger on your epitaph. Melissa? Electric currents suddenly passed through Arthur's mind and he quickly recalled all the memories about this woman. Isn't this his fellow mental patient? The other party did not die in Night City, and even became the police inspector of the terrorist mobile team. This is really a fickle thing. Dear Ms. Melissa, for the sake of sleeping on the same hospital bed before, please send your friends back quickly. I really can't stand the torture of these overly energetic young people. Just when Arthur finished these words, the aerial vehicle in the sky was filled with fear and excitement and it actually slowly stopped.
वीडियोस बनाने हैं, फिल्मोरा है ना?